Thank you, guys. The time is currently 1 o'clock on January 15th, 2026. The college basketball world was flipped upside down this morning by the indictment released coming out of Philadelphia. The indictment details the 20 individuals who are being charged on one count of bribery in sporting contests and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, along with 3 counts of wire fraud. I am now joined with Jack Morgan, the Duquesne beat reporter for A10 Talk. Jack, what do you know about the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a couple of situations where other A10 teams are involved, but let's talk directly about Duquesne. Duquesne was more so indirectly involved in this. I wouldn't say they're the victim because, as we're going to get into, it was actually these teams trying to tank to lose these games. Here's more on the specifics. Duquesne versus St. Louis at the UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse, February 20th, 2024. Duquesne was favored by over St. Louis by approximately 5 points in first half spread by most sports books in the United States and elsewhere. So before this game, and this is directly from the indictment paper, so I'm not making anything up here. This is actually what is said. For this game, fixers, including Marvis Farrelly and Roderick Winkler, and other acting at their direction, placed wagers with various sports books totaling at least approximately $242,000 on Duquesne to cover the first half spread. In the process of fixing this game and placing these wagers, defendants, Farrelly, and other fixers communicated via text about the game and wagers. For example, on or about the date of the Duquesne game, defendant Farrelly texted a straw bettor, Duquesne first half, bet it. So, on that day of the game, another defendant, and this is the actual player for St. Louis, his name is Bradley Azuero, and Azuero, if you're wondering why he matters in this, other than him being the defendant here, there's a reason they picked him. He appeared in 22 games while starting 21 for St. Louis in the 1 year he spent there. He averaged 12 points and 6.2 rebounds. So there's a reason they went to him. Now, on to that. Duquesne actually did outscore St. Louis 41-27. So if you remember, the line was 5 points. They hit that. So the fixers won their bets. Without the St. Louis players intentionally underperforming in the second half of the game, St. Louis actually played substantially better. They outscored Duquesne that second half 40-39. Duquesne did win that game 80-67. However, that does not matter in this case because they only bet the first half. So now, on to the second part, and perhaps the more wild part of this story, in my opinion, is the Duquesne-Fordham game, and this was 3 days later. So in an entire week, Duquesne had 2 games against teams who had players who were being bet on, abiding in this betting scandal, rather. So Elijah Gray and his teammates who played for Fordham, it's not confirmed who this teammate is, it's only called person number 4, they attempted to underperform and influence the game as they agreed. Now, both players scored fewer points than their season averages, with Gray scoring 3 points. Now, another caveat to the story, if you were on Twitter, you probably see someone named Ode Gray Sr. that is actually in every one of these comment sections actually pleading his case for his son, saying his son would never do a thing. So if you go on Twitter, A10 Twitter, you're probably going to see him. But that's kind of the wild part of the story because in this game, Duquesne outscored Fordham 32-26 in the first half. But Fordham came back in the second half and won that game 79-67. So this meant that the fixers who wagered on Duquesne for the full game lost their bets. They were supposed to have Duquesne win. However, here's where it gets wilder. Shortly after the game, defendant Jalen Smith and Elijah Gray, the player, communicated via text concerning the efforts of Gray and person number 4 to fix the game and the failure of the scheme to succeed. Gray told the defendant Smith, "I tried," and noted that the Duquesne players were, quote, not hooping, end quote, or played poorly, making it harder for Duquesne to cover the spread. Defendant Smith told Gray, quote, "You did your job for sure," end quote, and bemoaned the fact that another Fordham player who was not involved in the scheme had an excellent game. Now, that's a stats up on your screen. And Brendan, just give me one guess who you think that one player they were talking about was. You're going to go with Rose, right?
Yeah.
And this is the crazy part about this, is that Duquesne actually was not a victim in either of these, right? They were trying to have Duquesne win. However, they succeeded the first time but failed the second time. So this story is crazy, and there's a lot of others like it. I want to give you one that I just saw, and I do think is pretty crazy, and it comes out of DePaul. And this quote is something that I think is a huge alarm for the entire NCAA. During the game on or about March 5th, 2024, defendant Jalen Smith texted Macabre Etienne to complain that one of the players who was not involved in the point-shaving scheme for DePaul needed to chill the, I can't say the other word, but out. Etienne texted Smith back during the game and assured him that the DePaul players involved in the scheme were keeping the ball away from the player and preventing him from scoring. Defendant Smith responded that if Etienne and the other DePaul players kept to the plan, the bag, or bribe payments, would be on the way. Brendan, this is a huge issue with the NCAA. It's not just 1 or 2 games, as we might have thought when the Elijah Gray thing came out. This is wide scale.
Yeah, and it's not just the NCAA. We've seen this recently in the NBA as well. Gambling is becoming a huge problem for collegiate sports. And we're seeing it right now in the A10, the NCAA as a whole, and we're seeing it affect Duquesne. But let's be clear here. Duquesne is more of a victim in this, as their name is associated because they were a part of the games being played. They weren't the ones rigging the games, so no fear as a Duquesne fan. They did not do anything wrong, as it's being reported right now on Thursday, January 15th. We're about 1:05 p.m. Local time here. As we know, up to this point, Duquesne did not do anything wrong in this indictment. They are just mentioned because they were the team being played against when Fordham and St. Louis made these bets or were gambling, rigging these games.
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that we will monitor, but as it stands right now, it does not look like Duquesne is going to take any fall for this, as this indictment this is a long, this is 70 pages, so they're not in any of this. I doubt that there will be more to come out that comes against Duquesne, but it is something to look at because Duquesne is in the NCAA. And if the NCAA is having issues like this, there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the higher-ups to ensure that something like this never happens again, because it can't.
Yeah, and Jack, you report for the A10 Talk. Obviously, you're a beat reporter for Duquesne specifically, but the A10 Talk covers, obviously, all the teams. So you know a lot about different teams. We also saw LaSalle University mentioned in this. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they were included?
Yeah, LaSalle was in a game against St. Bonaventure. This, actually, I do need to confirm the exact date. However, this was around the same time as the Duke. It was in the same week. I can tell you that for sure. That was the same week that Duquesne and St. Louis and Duquesne and Fordham were being bet on. So this was a wild week for the A10 unironically. And the way it is mentioned and the language in that is basically that they tried to, the fixers, the defendants in this situation, tried to get LaSalle players. They tried to recruit LaSalle players to fix a game between LaSalle and St. Bonaventure. It did not happen. They did not, whether they got them or not, that bet did not hit. The spread, obviously betting on LaSalle to lose, it did not hit. So clearly, I think what people are saying is that they did not get any LaSalle players to willingly fix the games. And I think that also does give a lot of credit, dude. Fran Dunphy is a great coach, so I'm sure he's been over that program. Yeah, exactly. I think we were talking about it before this. I don't think it would. There was a lot of doubt that a team coached by Fran Dunphy would have any involvement in this in a direct manner.
Speaking of LaSalle, Philadelphia school, another Philadelphia school, Temple. The story actually came out of Philadelphia. That's where the indictment was released. Temple University, a couple weeks back, had a similar issue with this. They ended up releasing one of their players. I know this is outside of the A10, but do you have any news related to that? As we know of currently, is there anything related to the Temple scandal that's in this indictment, or is that something separate from the NCAA?
No, this is what I believe to be a direct kind of document in regards to that, because there was on October 29th when Wisconsin men's basketball forward Elijah Gray, he was dismissed from the program, and that raised a lot of alarm bells. That eventually ended up leading to, hey, he was betting on games. But there are more people. But they had not released that until, believe, late last night. January 14th is the exact date. However, it was not until this morning we really weren't talking about it, and there was nothing being put out about that. But since the kind of the onset of this morning and everyone waking up and seeing this, it has been wild. But it is this is what I believe to be a direct result of what happened to Elijah Gray, and this is kind of the huge fallout. He is listed in this indictment document, if I'm not mistaken, pretty close to the top. So certainly it's something that we'll have to monitor going forward. But listen, he's in this, and because of what went down with him, this is now us seeing the entire fallout from this situation. And listen, I think obviously there are a lot of punchlines to come out of this, and some of the stories, it's so unbelievable you have to laugh. I think the DePaul one for me it's so ridiculous. A guy is on the phone at halftime, or not even at halftime, in the middle of the game, texting a guy that he's fixing a game with. And that is just unbelievable to me. But it's so crazy and ridiculous. You sometimes laugh, but it's a very serious thing for the NCAA, and they got to figure this out, because if this happens again, I mean, you've already lost a lot of credibility and trust, not just in your players for having a fair, respectful game. You lost trust in your referees. And we know that a lot of referee hate and kind of just yelling at the referees is happening in every single game now. So now referees are at a minimum, because no one wants to grow up to be a referee and just get yelled at for the rest of the game, right? It's just a trickle-down effect that needs to be nipped in the bud. But I don't know how much of this bleeding you can stop if you're the NCAA, man. It's bad.
Yeah, and then I'll ask you one final question, and then we'll get everybody back to the regularly scheduled programming here today. But the next two games, ironically, for Duquesne, Saturday, January 17th, 12:30 p.m. at Fordham, and then Tuesday, January 20th, in the UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse, St. Louis makes the trip to Pittsburgh. Those are the exact same situations from 2024 when this all went down, the games involving Duquesne. Jack, my first question, one, do you think that any of this will spill over into those games, or do you think that with the transfer portal and so many guys being gone now, that it might not impact the current players in the current game? And two, what kind of discipline do you think either the NCAA or the A10 is going to give to St. Louis, Fordham, or any other Atlantic 10 team that was possibly involved in this scandal?
So I do believe that this gets tricky because Fordham and St. Louis do have new head coaches. Since this happened, those head coaches have been fired. Mike Magpeo, by the way, great guy. He is now the head coach of Fordham, and Salou has another head coach as well. So you can't really directly fine or suspend the head coaches involved in this. And the transfer portal, you made a good point with that. There's really, these guys that were involved in it are no longer at those programs. So I think that you could do something with the St. Louis school as a whole and maybe the athletics department. I think they might end up getting fined. But as for Duquesne versus these two teams in the next week, I don't think it ends up affecting the game. I think it just comes as a funny kind of end note or footnote to these games that, hey, listen, Duquesne played these two teams twice in the same week, and those two times the other team was gambling, using fixers to bet on games, and it's happening again. I don't think it's going to happen this week, but clearly I didn't think this would ever happen, so what do I know about what's going to happen in the future? But I think it's something that we can kind of laugh about in the sense that I don't think this will matter for the teams. But it's wild. It is a wild thing to look at. And when you told me that, I kind of had a light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God. That's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gives, at least for that game on Tuesday, it could give some bulletin board material to the Duquesne student section. If they want to go after St. Louis a little bit, they've got some.
And that's going to be a
they've
big
got
game
some
too.
material. That's a big game. St. Louis very strong this year. Obviously, they weren't strong when they were rigging games. Very strong this year. No. So as of what we know right now, Thursday, January 15th, it's about 1:10 p.m. Eastern time. This is what we know. If you would like to stay up to date, you can follow Jack on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
What's your handle?
On Twitter at Jack on the call. I'll be continuing to monitor this throughout the rest of the day, guys.
So follow Jack there to keep up to date with everything that's going on. You can also check out A10 Talk, where Jack writes for. I'm sure that you guys will have some content coming out about this.
For sure.
But now we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio.